discuss how we diminish any gender gaps across the curriculum and to explore the key features of outstanding leadership in early years. And we're going to try and fit that into an hour and a half. So we'll be touching on things, but, you know, please do ask questions, and you can always contact us beyond this session as well. So we thought that it would be good to start with our journey really at Pickhurst, and how we've developed our EYFS over the last few years really to get it to where it is today. And our journey started probably about 8 years ago when I joined Pickhurst about 8 years ago, I think, as EYFS leader. And the main focus at that point was around consistency of provision in our reception classes. We're a 4-form infant school, so we have 120 children per cohort, and we obviously have 4 classes. So it was really, to the head teacher at the time, it was a real focus for her to ensure that there was consistency across the classes, and that needed to start inside first. So very much we talked about what our vision needed to be. So as a team, we looked at that vision, and we looked at actually what was that going to be long term. So where did we want to go? Where did we want to finish up? Whether that might be in 5 years or 6 years or 3 years, you know, but actually, where did we want to go? And we knew everybody was very passionate about early years, and we knew that we wanted to have a really outstanding early years where children had a fantastic start to their education. So that vision was very important to us, and we also needed to share that vision with the staff, and that's something that we've done throughout this journey, is ensure that we empower everybody in reception, the reception team, and across the school to actually buy into the vision, and it be their vision as well, because if they're not empowered, then actually you're not going to get anywhere. And that was something that we needed to do quite at the beginning. It was to really look at, this is what we want across these years, and how are we going to get there. So it was a joint effort. All stakeholders had a part in that journey. We also had a bit more of a short-term vision as well. So as I said, it was actually, first of all, let's look at inside and let's get that consistency inside, and then we'll transfer that to outside, and then we'll look at the sort of things. And our vision adapted as we went through, which I'll sort of talk about now, and you'll see through our presentation today. So really, our long-term vision was to have an amazing early years based on really sound early years pedagogy. So we wanted to be very research based, and that was our long-term vision. Short term, we needed to look consistency inside, and then we wanted to look at outdoor provision, and then moving on, we wanted to look very much at gender gaps, and more recently we've looked at the last few years, it's been more around about enriching our provision, really challenging our children, and having a very personalised curriculum, but also that being a very natural curriculum as well. So trying to move away from lots of plastic to more natural resources. So you can see that our journey has kind of grown and morphed as we've gone through, but that shared vision is always very important. We achieved it through very good research, using research and early years pedagogy, and people really understanding why we wanted to do this, because we wanted our children to get the best possible start in life, and actually that it was going to have an impact on our children. And one of the ways we achieved this as well was at the time and right the way through, we ensure that we have a really strong model to follow in reception. So it may be that if we want to start something new, so right at the beginning, 8 years ago, one of the things we looked about was ongoing snacks. So what was happening, the children were all stopping for snack and having something to eat, and actually that wasn't a good use of time. So we wanted to introduce ongoing snack, but actually trying to do that across the year group straight away was going to really fall on its feet, because we needed to convince people that actually this was going to work. So we achieve a lot of what we do by having a model to follow. So someone will trial it, and then they will talk about the impact and what has happened, and then that rolls out to the other classes, and people can see that actually that made a difference, and actually what happened and what has happened across the years as we've done that, the person who's role modeled it has become the advocate. So it's not just senior leaders saying this is the best way to do it, but actually we've got advocates within EYFS that are saying this is working really well. So we achieved it by really drawing on people's strengths, getting the team involved, looking at research and being very evidence-based, so people could understand why we wanted to achieve this. We did have challenges along the way. We had to work on people's mindset, and I've given you a few examples of what we did there, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. We had challenges around our funding. We didn't have lots of money, so we've had to be really creative in the way that we've managed to find our resources. Lots of messages out to parents, lots of businesses, finding out where we can source things at not a too expensive rate, and obviously challenges that everybody has, that if you have a change of staff, you're having to sort of upskill people as well. We're quite lucky in that we do have quite a stable staff, but we do put a lot of time and effort into our CPD and ensuring that people have the appropriate support and challenge. So I think I've talked a little bit about how we've overcome those as well. Essine, I don't know if you want to kind of add anything there.
Well, good morning, everybody. So just when we're talking about our journey and our kind of continual journey, I think some of the key things for us has been that we're constantly reflecting on that journey. So, for example, sometimes we can set out to with our vision, we can talk to staff, we can get everybody, hopefully most people on board. And I think we'll talk a bit later about that in leadership, about getting everybody on board or getting most people on board. But I think the key thing has been to continually reflect on things that have been working well, things that are having an impact, continually reflecting on what the children are telling us, what they're showing us, and really observing and analysing really what the children need when you are on that journey of change. And that's ultimately what this is about. It's about leaders leading change effectively to get the outcomes that you feel are most important for your school.
And what I would say is that throughout our journey, we've always had leadership on board. So before I was head teacher, the head teacher was very passionate about early years, very much believed in it, and supported the team in being able to do it, because also some of the changes that happened in reception had impact on the rest of the school as well. So it's really understanding and having leadership driving what you want to happen, because actually if you haven't got strong leadership, if you haven't got leadership on board on that, it can make things quite tricky with some of the challenges that overcome. So strong leadership within leading EYFS, but also within your own school, and having the passion to want to do the right thing for early years is really important.
And before we move on, Liz, I was just going to say, and obviously we will touch on this a little bit later as well, but just when you're at that kind of start point with leading that change, and kind of just imagining you're on that road and that image in front of us, just really thinking about whether you feel that you have the right people on your bus for that journey. And that can be quite a hard thought sometimes when you're thinking about who's in your team and who's going to be there with you to drive that vision. And sometimes you have to consider whether the right people are in the right place in order to help drive that vision, because actually as leaders we know that you could be working with somebody for 5, 6, 7 years trying to get them to change their mindset, and whilst the majority of your staff, you hope that with the effective leadership and the right strategies you will get them on board and they will be able to contribute positively and professionally to what you're trying to achieve. But sometimes we have to consider, if there are people that maybe aren't in the right place, how we manage that as leaders too, which I think is important to mention, because actually we know that in the long term, sometimes people can be a huge barrier to overcoming, certain hurdles. So just want to touch on that now when we're thinking about journeys and how to put everybody on that bus.
Thank you, Mrs. We're going to look at the curriculum now. I'm going to hand back over to Essin. Something that is noted when we have external visitors is how the Eyfs curriculum really engages the children, and that there is very high engagement and learning happening across all of our 4 Eyfs classes. And within that there is lots of challenge. So that's what we're going to kind of focus on now, and hopefully you'll have an opportunity to have a chat amongst yourselves as well. So I'll hand over to Essin.
Okay. So wanted to talk to you about something that we feel is pretty much at the centre of everything that we do, and that's our curriculum. And that's something that we feel is a real strength of what we do here. And really, before I talk about anything else, that's that bubble that says knowing the children is key. And our curriculum is ever changing, it's always evolving, and it's reflected on not only at the start of the year but throughout the year, because we've got somebody saying that they're not able to see our screen. Can everybody else see our screen? Yeah, we've got nods. Yeah, not sure whether that's an individual. Oh yes, yeah, I'm not sure what's happened there. I'll carry on, and then shall I leave that with you, Aziz, to maybe?
Jude, I don't know whether it might be worthwhile to leave the meeting and come back and see if that helps at all. But I mean, I can see the presentation as well, so it might be something from your end. That's all I could suggest at this time. But yeah.
Okay. So when we're thinking about the curriculum, it's very much thinking about children at the heart of our curriculum. And each year our cohort changes in terms of actually what our children's needs are. So we do have some typical gaps that flag up every year, which is that there's always for us a gap between girls and boys in moving and handling on entry. That gap is quite large. And we always have a gap between boys and girls in reading and writing. And then sometimes we have gaps with our EAL children who in their PSED, particularly around making relationships and managing feelings and behaviour, and we know that that's due to language. And to just give you a bit of a context, our children, we have 120 children, and they come from over 40 different settings. So won't delve too much into this, but we do a lot of, we have lots of strategies in place to ensure we find out lots and lots of information about the children before they reach us. And I think that's key when we're talking about knowing the children, because actually we want to have a good curriculum in place that we feel is going to meet their needs before they start, and then we also then refine and tweak that once we get to know them more when they're in our setting. So normally we do things like home visits, but we've replaced that with telephone calls to every family this year. We've had normally they'll come in for play sessions, but we've had Zoom calls with teachers and children this year. We've had questionnaires sent out, we've had surveys sent out to preschools. So just to touch on, really, we do a lot of work at the beginning of the year to make sure we get in as much information about our new cohort as possible, because quite frankly, without that information, I'm not sure how we can plan an effective, stimulating, challenging curriculum for them. So knowing the children is really at the heart. But really, when we're thinking about some of those other things, is actually we know, for example, we know historically we always have some gaps within with language. So our prime areas are a real focus for us, particularly in the autumn term. And our high outcomes, so significantly above average nationally, significantly above our local data, we know that we achieve those high outcomes because we actually prioritise the prime areas in the autumn term. So we do not start phase 2 phonics when the children start in reception. Because actually we know that phase 1 is really important in phonics, and there are lots of children who need to go over or learn some of those key skills in phase 1 phonics. So going back to that, we ensure that our curriculum is really language rich, both particularly in autumn term, but across the year. So you will see we have a word collectors initiative in our school where we almost make the children experts in finding interesting and different vocabulary that's shared and that's really drawn out throughout the learning, whether that's in maths, whether that's in key text that we use, and that's displayed and the children are encouraged to use those new words that they've learned. We don't shy away from using ambitious language with the children, but we introduce it, we model it. When we're thinking about our curriculum, we're really thinking about actually what's going to stimulate the children in their learning, what's going to provide a good hook. And sometimes we need to review actually hooks that we used last year. Is that going to interest the cohort this year? Actually, this year we have got gaps, significant gaps between girls and boys across all aspects, which is new. We don't normally have it across all aspects on entry, but we do this year. So actually we need to think, is our curriculum really hooking those boys in across all areas? And what might we need to tweak? What might we need to change? You know, what are our boys interested in? Only 29% of our boys this year are age-related for reading. So let's have a think, you know, do they enjoy reading? That's our first question. So let's not yet think about phonics and maybe what their specific gaps are in reading, but do they enjoy picking up a book? Yes, no. If no, why not? Let's find out. So that pupil voice is really important when we're also shaping our curriculum. Thinking about that enriching provision. So we have done a lot of work with our staff about what enriching, challenging provision looks like. And actually what challenging provision looks like in terms of moving their learning on. So Liz mentioned a little earlier that we have a bit of a focus on continuous provision and natural materials. So I just want to clarify so that it doesn't sound, you know, tokenistic as to why we've gone for natural materials. So one of the things that we picked up on is a few years ago, we had a child that entered our reception class on his first day. And he said, in fact, it wasn't his first day, it's when he came for a play session in June. And he said, oh, Duplo, oh, not Duplo again. And we were like, oh my goodness. So the teacher asked him and said, you know, tell me what you mean. He said, oh, I played with Duplo at preschool and I played with it so much and I've got it at home. And we immediately started to think, actually, we need to look at this. So are we providing resources that children are already, the resources that children feel that they have already mastered, and resources that don't allow children to be challenged? And actually when we looked at Duplo, it is quite a simple plastic resource, and actually it has limiting factors. For some children it's still appropriate, and some children need the simplicity that it offers for where they are in their stage of development, but there are children that need something more challenging, which is why we began to look at loose parts and why we began to look at the open-ended challenge that natural materials can have. And want to touch on the characteristics of effective learning and how they basically underpin absolutely everything we do. And obviously we're aware that they are statutory in terms of reporting to parents at the end of the year, at the end of the EYFS, but actually they underpin everything. We know that if children have developed those characteristics of effective learners, they've basically got the tools to be great lifelong learners, and that's what we want. And we are very clear as a leadership team in terms of what our priorities are. And I think if you cannot prioritise the characteristics of effective learning in early years, then, you know, we need to evaluate why that is. You know, that is the chance to build children's resilience, to encourage them to take risks, to encourage them to be able to review why things have worked and how we can make things better. It's a chance to ensure that children are engaging with others, they're working with others, they're developing their PSCD skills. So they take priority in our curriculum, and you'll see that threaded through all the way through the year and beyond. And they're not just a priority in year 1 but in year 1 and year 2 here at our infant school. And we're really critical of consistency, because actually our children here, regardless of which class they're in, they are entitled to that high level curriculum, they're entitled to that outstanding teaching and learning, regardless of which class they're in. So it's my job, it's our job as a leadership team to ensure that we're aware of strengths and weaknesses that there may be within classes or within teams or within teaching knowledge or subject knowledge within our teaching assistants, and ensure that we're putting in strategies to ensure that they are strengthened. So actually, you know, if we're picking up that we've got some really strong continuous provision in one class, how do we share that? How do we ensure that everyone's getting access to looking at that and unpicking that? And our curriculum is really open-ended. So you won't see paper plates in our provision. You won't see children being given set colours. You'll see lots of colour mixing. It's really challenging, and we ensure that children are taught skills, but they are not taught outcomes. So, and that's really key. So we're really clear on which skills we want to teach the children, but the way in which they apply that is provided in a really open-ended way. So, you know, children will have the opportunity to take the skills and the knowledge that they've learned and to be able to shape that into something where they've had the opportunity to be creative and independent. So I hope that kind of gives you a little bit of a flavour of our curriculum. And I could do a whole day on our curriculum, but it's just a chance to for me to share some of the things that we feel are most important.
Sorry, Essie, and I was just going to mention as well around the enriching provision. We initially did a lot of work with our staff on how you build on that provision across the week. So we're not changing something every single day, so that actually you might start something at the beginning of the week. So for example, you might have like a dinosaur small world available for the children to explore. But actually what you would do after the first couple of days is perhaps include some kind of problem for them to solve, or you might introduce new materials, or then you might add some books or some writing pro formas, and actually that provision builds up across the week, and it might be longer than a week, but actually rather than everybody being right, okay, we've got the train set today and we'll have the small world, you know, the house tomorrow, we're saying stick with it and build on it and look at what the children want and add to that provision, which is why it's really important to have more open-ended resources. I think you can see a few in the pictures there, but you know, we don't have one water tray outside. We have several water trays and different kinds of buckets and things, and we have guttering and we have pipes and we have tubing, so actually children can explore and you can add things. And then the more open-ended your resources are, so if you're being, you know, if you've got the car mat at the cars and the mats out, and you've got guttering and you've got tubing and you've got different kinds of surfaces available and different kinds of cars, then actually for an adult it's much easier for the adult to extend the learning as well, because they have lots of resources to draw on. If you're faced with a water tray with one water wheel and a car can be very, you know, generalistic, but actually as an adult there's not much you can do to extend children's learning. But if you have a range of resources available to you, you can bring things more easily to you. And right at the beginning of our journey as well, we used to have questions, open-ended questions on laminated sheets that and it seems strange to have that now because our staff don't, but they had little sheets and laminate and they were stuck around the room and they were on clipboards to support them in being able to ask the right kind of questions. We don't need that anymore because our staff are much more confident in being able to do that. But that was something that was modelled very clearly to start with and really supported children to extend children's learning, because something we're very passionate about is ensuring that adults are not constantly tied into directed activities, so that you will not find in our EYFS classes 2 adults doing a focus activity. Well, we are full form, so not everybody has to go out at the same time. But if 2 adults are inside, or if 1 adult is inside, that adult isn't pulled into an adult focus, but will be moving around, moving children's learning on, because it's all very well thinking about curriculum and providing resources and opening of resources, but there does need to be an adult there at times being able to extend and move that learning on. So a lovely example, a couple of, I think it was last year, might have been the year before actually, I think this year's gone a bit blah, a little girl was out in the outdoor area with her teacher, and she walked past and she said to the teacher, "Oh my goodness, you smell really nice." And the teacher, "Oh, thank you very much, I've got a new perfume." And the little girl said, "Oh, what's perfume?" So she said, "Actually, you know, perfumes, when you mix lots of things together and it produces a lovely smell." And the little girl was really interested, and she said, "Well, I tell you what, should we go to our potion station and let's see if we can find some things, and you could make your own perfume." So so therefore they moved over, they explored, they went and got more things at forest school, that herb, you know, bits of leaf and flowers and things that they could add in. And then more and more children were making their own potions, they were writing potion lists, they were looking up sort of science and mixing, and so that adult was able to move that on, but also the resources enabled her to do that. So I just wanted to kind of share that, because it does make a very big difference to the level of engagement that your adults can have with the children in your setting.
Absolutely, Liz. And when we're going back to the characteristics of effective learning, and we talked about things like making sure that children are having a go, they're evaluating their learning, they're having the opportunity to change what they do, risk take. If, for example, children go over to the construction area or your craft area or whatever zones you have in your EYFS, and they're making something and all they have available is tape, they're not going to be able to evaluate whether that is the most effective method of sticking 2 things together if there isn't Pritt stick and PVA glue and treasury tags and hole punches available. So that, as Liz picked up, those resources can be a real limiting factor to how challenging and open-ended your environment is. And I think the environment we very much see here as the 3rd adult. So actually what provision we provide for the children, their resourcing, the additional adults, the displays, everything really should have earned its place, because it has a place in that environment for the children to learn from it. And we have built a culture within our staff that we will continually reflect and evaluate, and they are so used to change now that everybody embraces it. So, you know, and the way that one of the strategies that's really effective is we say to staff that let's give something a try, and we'll come back in a couple of weeks and see how that's gone, and you'll have the opportunity to feedback and let us know if it's been a disaster. So people feel really a lot more at ease at trying new things, because they know that actually nothing is set in stone here, and actually if we've tried something and it doesn't work, we're going to adjust things again. So people aren't worried really actually about the consequences of trying something new, and if it goes wrong, and what happens if we're stuck doing something that doesn't work, because they know that we're always evaluating, and we have a very much open door here with leadership. People feel very comfortable to come and talk and say if something's not working. So I think that's very important when we're talking about leading change in any kind of setting. Should we move on, Liz, to share our virtual video? I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you. So normally at this point is when we go down into reception and we see the children at work, and hopefully, you know, fingers crossed, we'll still have an opportunity to do that at some point next year. But meanwhile, we're just going to show you a little tour of the setup of our reception. You don't want any children in it, but you'll see how our reception classrooms are set up indoors and outdoors. So just bear with me while I do a little bit of sharing the screens, and then we can.
And while Liz is just getting that ready, it'd be really lovely if when you're kind of just having a look at our recording, that you maybe just reflect on some of the things that we've said, and whether you feel that, you know, it's reflective in our video of what we're showing you. And also, if there's anything, it'd be lovely if we have the opportunity maybe after the video for you to kind of share or ask any questions. And what I really want to emphasize here is, yes, we're really proud of our early years, and yes, we have been working very, very hard on this for a long time. However, this isn't the way to do anything. You know, everybody finds their own way, and your individual schools will be so unique and special in their own way. So we just want to make sure that the message is that we're by no means perfect. We haven't cracked it all. We've got lots of things to develop, but this is just a snapshot of where we are with our journey. That's all.
And I think following this, we're going to go into some breakout rooms just to have a chance to sort of talk about what we've seen and to share ideas. So we will play. It's about the reception part. Is probably about 8 minutes long, I think. So can everybody see? Can you see that, Aziz? Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. That
Thank you. It's our sandpit without sand at the moment, but does normally have sand. The area to the right is a woodworking area as well. We do woodwork in reception and in year one.
And our view very much is, when we're thinking about outdoor provision, is what does the outdoors offer that the indoors doesn't? So there will be no replication of what's out inside being put outside. The outdoors is recognised as being a new, different environment that has its own uniqueness that needs to be used in order to facilitate effectively, not us trying to, you know, put cutting and sticking outside. That's not, you know, that wouldn't be an effective use of using the outdoor space.
And you can see in the outdoor area, and you'll see inside in a minute, that resources, as we've said, are really open-ended. So there are lots of different resources there to really enable the children to explore, problem solve, and challenge themselves. There are loose pots.
Sorry, I was just going to say, the reason why that board is empty is because we have a kind of a policy here that we don't put sounds up on the wall unless we've taught them. So, so that the environment doesn't become like wallpaper, but children see that the purpose of things being put up on display. So once phase 2 is started, and I know we had a question shortly earlier about when does that normally start. Normally starts around just after half term, so that's when as letters are taught, they are put up on display.
And I think something else that is evident around the classes that we really feel passionate about is that every surface is utilised, and so there are lots of our pauses now, so moving to year 1, which looks it's very similar to reception. You will not be surprised to hear. So let me just stop sharing. Great. So I just wonder, Aziz, whether it would be possible to put people into breakout rooms and have an opportunity just to talk about what we've discussed so far, and perhaps there may be, sort of to share some ideas, or there may be other questions that you want to ask, but an opportunity for you to have to talk to each other rather than us just talking at you.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope it was useful to just break out there and maybe just reflect on what you've seen so far, and also the fantastic learning environment that Liz and Essen have demonstrated there. Would anyone like to feed back on any of the reflections or comments from their group at all? Would anyone like to share their thoughts so far? I'll just open it up.
Hi, we were just talking, because I'm a 4th elementary school as well, and we're just talking about how you keep the consistency between all the classes, because that's kind of one of our big things at the moment, is maintaining that consistency between all 4 classes to make sure they've all got the same kind of provision and the same level of challenge.
Oh, sorry, Liz, you're just muted, and thank you, Kate, for feedback.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. So initially, it's about having very clear expectations for everybody, and having so everybody knows what needs to be in their classrooms. Everybody knows what the expectations are. We have very clear. I'm trying to think. Guidelines is kind of a word I would use. But at the beginning of it, and at the beginning of every year this happens, they are shared very clearly with the team, and it's literally a document that says what the expectations are. So to start with, everybody knows where they need to what the expectations are. But then we will ask teachers to audit resources. We will and I'm sure this is the same in many schools. I remember coming, and my classroom had absolutely nothing in it because the previous teacher had taken it all. The person next door had accumulated things over about 30 years, and so we made it very clear that actually if you have a resource that is really good, everyone's entitled to be able to have that resource or use it. So there isn't anyone, we kind of will have to be really clear with people and say, we don't want you buying your own resources. If there's something that you think is going to be really important for the children, then share it across with everybody, and we'll purchase it for the school. And obviously we couldn't do that all at once. We had to build that up so that provision and resources is equitable across the classes, but also it's just being very mindful of popping in, feeding back, having opportunity to share. All of our reception teachers have their PPA time together. So it's Zooming at the moment, but they do have it, they do have it together so they can share strategies. And Essin is part of that. So she can really pick up anything that might need to be discussed and talk about that during PPA, which can then be addressed straight away. And there are opportunities for staff to go in and visit each other's classrooms to have that discussion. So that, but definitely you're monitoring that feedback, and Essin is absolutely fantastic at giving that feedback very quickly. So rather than doing, we're going to do an observation and going to feedback when we get time 4 days later, it's about just dropping in and just saying, oh, I've noticed that, so do you need some more resources for that? Or, I wonder, so-and-so down there has done something really fantastic. You might want to just pop in because it's an amazing idea. I wouldn't have thought of it. Or so that feedback is given very quickly to staff. And we do put a lot of effort into CPD as well. So we don't expect staff to take something on board unless we've given them the training to be able to do that. Essin, I don't know if you want to say anything else.
And also, just very quickly as well, a couple of things. So we are really clear as a team and as a staff that yes, on entry we may only have a few children that are working above age-related expectations, but by the end of the year, here are the percentages that we normally achieve or exceeding. Now, there is no point in identifying above age-related children in Spring 2. It's too late. So you, as a leadership, we're really clear on that early identification of children who may be working above age-related expectation. And actually, in order to help move everybody on, we need to ensure that the provision is challenging throughout the year so that actually everybody has access to that challenge, because there are children who might want to do that and surprise you. So everybody sees the real purpose of having challenging, high quality provision. And going back to what Liz said, if I walk past the classroom and I see that, there's a bit of provision that looks a bit, and then the next day it still looks like that, everybody knows that I've got a very kind of, I'm quite direct, very lovely with it, of course, but I'll mention it, and everyone just knows that's something they need to do something about quite quickly. But we have that culture. So as a leadership team, extremely supportive to our staff, but there is that challenge, and everybody knows what's expected of them. Everyone knows that if I've asked for something or I've mentioned something, I will follow it up. So there's that trust and respect within the team, within the school, around expectations. Continuous provision is also planned for, so that's on part of our planning. So somebody does plan for continuous provision, and we'll put ideas on there. And the continuous provision plan is there to dip into if you want to. You don't have to put everything out that's on there, but it's a bank of ideas for you to refer to.
I'm just conscious of the time, Aziz, and should I move on to the next section, if that's okay?
I think that's probably best, Liz. Yeah, and if there are any other questions or reflections, then maybe we can come to them at the end. Might be a more suitable time. But yeah, if you want to move on to the next section, Liz, that might be the most appropriate way forward. Thanks.
So I'm going to start, and then Essie will continue to talk a little bit about how we close out our gender gaps. I think one of the main ways you've seen already, it's having a really exciting, engaging curriculum and resources that will really ensure children are moving forward in their learning and have that really high engagement. And We are also very forensic in our data. So we will look at our data and really unpick it. So we will look and see, actually in that autumn term, there are big gaps between boys and girls. But I think what is very important is looking at the gaps, identifying those barriers very early, but ensuring that we focus on the right kind of thing. So if we are noticing that there are huge gaps in writing between boys and girls, we will immediately look at the other areas, because actually there's a lot, as you know, there's so much that sits behind writing. So starting very quickly with writing is not going to make a difference to those boys, for example, but actually we need to unpick, is there a speaking gap? Is there a fine motor gap? And then going even more forensic into that, is it spoken language? Is it listening? Is it understanding? So you have to, once we've analysed and identified those barriers, we've got to be really precise in what it is that we're focusing on. So an example there, for the boys, for example, looking at gross and fine motor development. But it's not just about, okay, well, we're planning some fine motor activity, get some tweezers out, we're getting to scrunch up some paper here and now. It's about actually, what do they need? So something we do when the children all start in reception is we assess their pencil grip, and we look to see what kind of grip they have. So is it whole hand? Is it fist? Is it triangular? And then from that, we will plan activities that will support their fine motor development. And we will look at the stages that we need to go through. Because actually, if a child has got a full fist grip, that is a grip of a 2-year-old. So immediately trying to get them to hold a pencil correctly and to do so is not going to work. We need to look at actually how we're going to get that child from a fist to a pincer grip first. And so we will unpick. So that's going back to all that research that we do, and we are very, we can share with people some of our work around the hand grip. But basically, the teachers have up. With each hand grip, there are a bank of activities that the children can do and you can plan for that will move them on with their fine motor development. So we're quite forensic and careful in our planning, which then moves children on. So for our boys in particular, that is really important. And so in those prime areas in that autumn term, to close our gender gap in writing, we are going to have to do a lot of work on fine motor development, gross motor development, and on spoken language, because we need to enrich vocabulary. We insist, if children are able, on full sentence responses. That's something that comes throughout our school, that you always respond in a full sentence if you are able to. So that is important, but also, as Essen said, developing those characteristics of learning. So sometimes it may be that those children just don't want to try, or they're not very confident with that. So we do a lot of work on what determination and resilience means. So we have resilience tables at the beginning of the year. They might not be called resilience tables. I do apologise, Essen, if that isn't the case. But I think have a go tables. So there might be 3 different puzzles of different levels and a timer. And children have to see if they can do the puzzles. Can you challenge yourself and do the next one? So activities that are graded in a nice way, sort of low risk way, that encourages children to have a go, which then translates into their own learning. But then also really capturing and hooking children in. So again, thinking about boys writing, actually understanding, first of all, why we need to write our name. So, why is our name important to us? So our teachers do a lot of work with the children on, well, why do you think your family has chosen your name? Why don't you go and ask? Why don't you find out? So actually our name is really special. So it's really important that we learn to write our name, because that's special to us. So actually they might come in the morning and the first thing they might have to do is find their name hidden somewhere right at the beginning, and they talk, and they've got that, and then they will learn to write their name. But alongside that, because writing isn't just about name writing, there'll be lots of lovely mark making activities as well. So mark making in slime, with chalks, in glittery flour. So lots of different, big huge sheets of paper on the floor. You will see that in all reception classes, and massive sheets of rolls of paper so children can lay on their tummies. Because also we know that children don't necessarily sit at a table to do their writing initially. For us, it's fine. We have lots of vertical surfaces that children can write on. They can write on their tummies, lots of clipboards. So when we're looking at our gender gaps, it's about identifying what skills you have to do first. So in that autumn term, that is something we really focus on, particularly with our boys writing. And then by the spring term, as they start to move and develop in their vocal development and their spoken language, they are ready to look more and focus more on the phonics and the writing, the sort of grammar side of things, and because they've got the skills to be able to do that. And therefore they fly, they really fly. And obviously we look at that again and we tweak and we turn, and every year some things are the same, some things are different. So we're very forensic in identifying our gender gaps and quite bespoke. And also we have very, very few interventions in reception. My philosophy is that you put the fence at the top of the hill and not the ambulance at the bottom. So we will do a lot of work on quality first teaching. So that is whole class focuses. We will target children. So we might, children might be targeted to do fine motor development activities across a day. They will have time to work with their teacher in order to enable to do that. And we do quite a lot of pre-teaching here, so pre-teaching language and concepts to children who are not sure, so that when they come into that session, they are experts and they can access that session, and then obviously picking it up with post-teaching if need be. So in reception, we don't really have interventions apart from spoken language, so talk boost and chat boxes for our children who need specific speech and language targets, or our EAL children that benefit from talk boost. So they're really the only interventions that we have that are not part of that quality first teaching. And then the reason why we can close our gender gaps is because we have very strong effective leadership. As I said, is very good at being able to identify those gaps with the team, but it is a whole team approach. It's not Essing looking at the data saying, okay, this is what it says, off we go. Essing will look at it first, but then she will share that with the team, including the teaching assistants. We dedicate time to talk through and say, look, what are you noticing? What do we need to do? So it's a whole team approach, and those effective strategies are shared, and that's often done in our planning time. So Essing might say, okay, bring one really effective strategy that has really had an impact on boys' spoken language or our girls' maths. So those strategies are shared on a regular basis, and we come back and we visit them. The adder deployment is key in those gender gaps. So again, it's not about interventions, but it's about putting adults in the right place. So in that first autumn term, it may be that actually your adults need to be in your sand and your water play, your construction area, because that's where, for example, your boys might be, and you're going to have to develop their language and follow their interests. So probably doing name writing is not the best place for those adults to be. So really thinking about how adults in whole quality first teaching can make a difference to closing those gender gaps, but also making sure we put staff CPD in. So when we started to research about hand gripped, one teacher was particularly looking at that, was very interested, and then that kind of rolled out to everybody, and we had very targeted CPD on that. But then we shared it as a school, because actually it has a really big impact in year 1 and 2 as well. And leaders, and that final point about leaders, everyone being leaders in our school, I'll talk about this in leadership a little bit later. Everybody's seen as a leader in our school. So actually, if you are passionate about something, you champion it, and we really value people's ideas and strategies. So that's kind of some of the points around closing sort of gender gaps, sort of generalistic, but definitely focusing in on those prime areas, and and resources as well. We said hooks into learning, but for girls, for example, for maths, as well as having our little animals and all of those kind of things you can count, we have lots of sparkly, lovely pebbles and things that children can explore. And actually, for some girls, that hooks them into wanting to count and explore and sort, and then you can follow their interest in that way. So it's really knowing the children well and having very good early years pedagogy to know where to take those children next. I don't know if anybody has any questions.
There's a couple of questions that have just been posted, and I've just got one from Jude, who says, when do you feel children are ready for cursive handwriting?
Well, we don't do cursive handwriting. So controversially, and I'm not saying you can or can't, but we chose here, and this is a personal decision as a head teacher for my school, I'm not saying this is just my personal decision, that actually, not mine, but our leadership's personal division, that actually cursive script for our children isn't the right thing for our children, because actually a lot of the joins in cursive scripts are developmental and are quite hard for children to do. So in reception, some of the crossing ones are very difficult for children to do if they've got poor fine motor development. So we've made a choice, that's our choice, not because we do joint handwriting, and children join when they are developmentally ready, and we have a very strong progressive handwriting curriculum across the school. Where schools do cursive script, often we would say cursive script when the children are ready. So, you know, sort of not encouraging them to use that if they physically are unable to do some of those joins. But if you're using cursive script in school, then obviously you need to model it and show it to children. But that's our belief based on the research that we have done. But that's our personal opinion. I do have to make that very clear.
Thanks, Liz. And Lizzie has a question about, could you possibly share what a typical day looks like in your school? But I wondered if you'd be comfortable to potentially share contact details and maybe pick that up following this meeting, rather than going into too much specifics at this stage. Jan has a question. How do you facilitate support staff taking part in planning?
Essie, would you like to answer that one?
Sure. So we're for elementary school, and our teachers all, we have a business meeting with just teachers and myself every Tuesday at 11:45. So after this meeting, that's where I'll be, and there'll be that in that business meeting, which is around half an hour, 45 minutes. It will focus on how the children responded to planning this week, what next steps are, what's coming up in planning. We'll talk about. And actually between now and Christmas, the focus in those business meetings is all boys and the progress of boys. The minutes of those meetings get shared with the whole team, and then so TAs get CC'd into that. All of our planning gets sent to the whole team, so the expectation is that all teachers and teaching assistants have read and seen planning, and then teaching assistants, with the support of myself or our teacher lead on outdoor planning, will plan for outdoor provision. And we also have an HLTA who is our outdoor provision lead in reception, who we've trained. So they are also very much involved in planning for the outdoors under guidance from myself or a teacher. So and they also get a chance to feed back to their teachers, that if there's something that's come up, they'll bring that to business. We've obviously had less team meetings because of COVID, but normally we also have regular meetings with our TAs at a minimum of once a half term to reflect on how the half term's gone and how the children responded to planning and any tweaks we might need to make for the next half term. But we ensure that our teaching assistants definitely feel like they have a voice to also share kind of their thoughts and reflections on children's progress.
Can I just also, I just wanted to mention about capturing learning as well within our closing gender gaps, that we really make sure that we capture learning in lots of different ways. So if we are trying to capture mark making and writing, that will be through photographic evidence and in different ways. And actually for writing, for some of our children at the beginning of term, it would be fine motor development activities and mark making. We wouldn't expect to see that particularly written in a book or in a more formal way. So it's really in making sure that we capture learning in the right way as well, because sometimes if we are only presenting evidence at a book look of in a literacy book, then we won't see the full picture, and therefore we might not really see where children's starting points are. So really thinking about that, and therefore we had to do quite a lot of work with our subject leaders as well about what learning will look like for writing in autumn term and reception, that actually you need to be looking as a leader, you need to be looking at the fine motor development activities and the spoken language activities, as well as the mark making and writing. So it's upskilling your subject leaders as well in what to look for, so that they are aware and are able to support with those closing of gender gaps as well.
Thanks, Liz. There's a few other questions popped in just regarding like what a typical day might be in a timetable as well. But just in the interest of time, I think it might be good to crack on, and maybe, like I said, if there's time at the end, we can come back to those.
That's fine.
Thanks.
I'm just Essing, did you just want to mention, I think we talked about vision quite a lot, but we just want to put that in because it's really important. So
yeah, absolutely. So just going to kind of really go back to this really, because when we're talking about your vision, what we hope that from today you'll be able to reflect on your vision for your setting, for your EYFS, and I'm sure you've all got thoughts and already have things in place. But just a couple of questions really to reflect on, what do you want teaching and learning and provision to look like, as practitioners, as teachers, as leaders, being really clear on what in essence, in practice, what you want it to look like. And really thinking about your vision and chunking it in terms of what you'd hope for by the end of the year. Now we say the end of the year, that's realistically probably only about 6 weeks away, but what's your kind of vision for the next few months, your short term, your medium term and your long term vision, and really thinking about how everybody in your team, whether that be your EYFS team, your senior leadership team, how is the vision going to be presented to them, and why is that the vision, and ensuring that you're really clear on kind of why is that important for you and your school. Sorry, that's my radio, apologies. And just really ensuring that the way that you share that ensures that everybody has an understanding. Because when, as leaders here, when we've unpicked why sometimes things haven't quite gone to plan, or quite, why aren't people on board? Sometimes we've unpicked it as simple as actually the vision needs to be re-clarified again, or we need to go back to that, or we need to support individuals in understanding where this has come from. And actually what it's backed up by, is it backed up by data, is it backed up by research, and that often really supports buy-in, and people will have a greater understanding as to why that is the goal really. And just some things to consider in when we're thinking about leadership, particularly, and about whether leaders in your setting have got the skills and the confidence to be able to lead that, and if not, what can be put in place to support with that. And sometimes there can be quite specific training that actually leaders need. So actually sometimes leaders might need a little bit of support with regards to having challenging conversations and how to manage those in order to support with driving teaching and learning forward. Thinking about how you're going to check whether you're on track with that vision, and particularly during these times, it's challenging with regards to kind of the normal learning walks and booklets and other things that you may normally have set in your school may be a bit different at this time, but how you can check in on how you're getting on with moving towards that vision that you have, particularly seeing what the children are doing and what they're showing you, and whether that be with regards to what they're saying, how they're responding to provision, with regards to what their assessment, their data showing, and really thinking about that consistency. And if you're of one form entry, measuring whether that's consistent from day to day or multi-form entry, whether that's consistent from class to class, and that really, as a leader, kind of what you may need to put in place in order to get that consistency, whether that be sharing strategies, whether that be, sharing photos, whether that be, looking at shared planning, or and really who will be monitoring that, and how you'll kind of keep checking in to see whether you're achieving really what you're setting out to, really.
Thank you. Could someone just, I don't, because I'm sharing my screen, I can't see the time.
It's 11:20, Liz.
10:20.
Pardon?
11:20.
Lovely, excellent. Right, no, we're nearly there. Thank you. I'm just sharing this slide because this is, when going in and monitoring teaching and learning in the EYFS, particularly if you have subject leaders who are not sure what they might be looking at, we do unpick with people that actually you're going to be looking at different things in there, not just what the children are doing, but what are the adults doing to support learning, and how is the environment supporting children in progressing. So that's just quite kind of a handy thing to look at, particularly if people are not familiar in observing in EYFS. And that previous one is just to remind people that actually in the Ofsted handbook, it doesn't say that teaching needs to be formal or top down, and actually it's about facilitating learning, and you will see a range of different ways to encourage that is happening. So that's just there just to remind people, really. So really, just to finish off and build on what Essin has said, that actually for us, the reason why that we've moved on in our EYFS is that leadership is driving that improvement, which is really important. So it's great to have all of the things, but we need to have that overall understanding. So that support is important. So that support, be that in training and CPD, but actually that if we're doing this for you, the expectation is that we do see that in the classroom, and that is happening. And ensuring that any CPD that we run does have impact, and it is because because there is a gap there. That it isn't just because somebody wants to go in there, but it is going to make a very big difference. And just I think Essin's already touched on this. Empowering the right people to drive change is really important, and that the whole team is on board. And as Essin said, our TA, we've got a high level teaching assistant who leads in outdoors. We have teaching assistants that drive phonics and champion phonics. So everybody feels that they have a part in making a difference to the school and in leading that and moving forward. And often something will start with somebody, and it might move to a different person. But it's just really being able to utilise your team's strengths, and the more you get your team on board, the more impact it's going to have in your setting. So that was just something we wanted to kind of end on, but we have talked about that all the way through. So I don't know whether we want to, Essin, whether you wanted to say anything more. I'm not spending a great deal of time because we touched on it all the way through.
And it would just be literally 30 seconds, but also just the other thing is just ensuring that whatever your vision is for your early years, that it's really tightly linked to school improvement plan, to performance management, to subject leader action plans. It should be all really, really tight. Really, there should be that really tight kind of cyclical model. So actually, if, for example, somebody asks a question about how you ensure there's consistency across classes, well, actually, if you are noticing that high quality provision or challenging provision is particularly an issue in one class, actually, I would keep that in my mind for when I'm doing performance management with that teacher, because actually it should everything that you're doing at every level should be having an impact in driving that change forward. So it shouldn't just be kind of sitting down in EYFS in isolation. It should just all be really, really tight, and everyone should be aware, everyone should be focusing on those things. So that's all really.
Thank you. So, Essin, I don't know whether you wanted us to talk about a day. We've got 5 minutes or so.
Yes, yeah.
Generally.
Yeah, I'm very happy to, as I flick back through the questions also, we had a question from Alex regarding, do you follow a specific topic and also books? Just to say, we do have key texts that we use in our learning journey. You are very welcome to go onto our school website, so Pickhurst Infant Academy, and if you click under reception, under year groups, you will see our current, oh, there it is. That you live.
Yeah.
Look at that, seamless. There is our learning journey for this year. So we do have key texts. Now this one that's on the website, I've actually taken key texts off, only because I know that actually is it on that one? Oh yes, it is on that one. Sometimes our parents are very keen and then they go and purchase all the key texts and read them to the children before we've taught them. So I take that one off with the parent version. But yes, we do have key texts that we use, but we do review them every year. So sometimes we think, oh, are they going to, hook this cohort in? If not, we look for others. And we're quite critical of the texts we use. We're really particular. And a few years ago, we did some training called The Power of Reading by the CLPE, which are a charity in London, the Centre of Literacy and Primary Education. They've got a training program called The Power of Reading. We did that, and it was all about powerful text. So we used what we've learned there, and so yes, that's what. And we just use themes that we think are going to engage the children, and we do change them regularly. So I think, Liz, if you go back to the top, you scroll to the top. Yeah, we've got Natural Adventurers, autumn term theme, which links really lovely to all the loose parts and the natural play that we do. Jurassic lands and mythical creatures and fantastic stories are our themes, and then we've got some sub-themes that sit underneath that, but we change those every year. And going through a typical day, so I'll do pre-COVID. I mean, I can't even remember what life pre-COVID was like, but I'll give you kind of a typical timetable prior to March. So the children will come in the morning, and our children go straight to activities. So they'll go to continuous provision activities straight away. They don't come and sit on the carpet. This sends the message that we want children to be active learners, and also children had a stressful start to the day, or they're coming upset. They're not really in the mind to sit on the carpet and listen to or participate in whole class input at that point. So straight to activities, and then after about 20-25 minutes, then we'll have phonics. So phonics is normally pre-March, around sort of 9:25. And then they'll have like a 15, 20 minutes max input, and 20 minutes is really more in the spring. So first, when children start, we just have a 5 to 10 minute input, and then it slowly increases. But around this sort of time, about 15 minutes. So they have a phonics input, and they have that at the start of the day, so they can apply their phonics throughout the day in the provision that's available. Then they'll go to provision activities, and during that time, the teacher may be doing some guided work, or maybe picking up a few things from phonics. We'll also have guided reading going on at that time. Then the outdoor area opens it's open earlier now, and it's working great, but around 10 o'clock, the outdoors is open till around 11:30 for the children come in for another input, often a learning theme or maths before they get ready for lunch, and then they have lunch for around an hour and 15 minutes. And then in the afternoon, when they come back in, they'll do a quick wake and shake, and then they will have a maths input for around 15-20 minutes. Again, it might be outside, inside, depends very much on what the learning intention is. Again, provision activities, and followed by one adult doing guided work if there are 2 adults in the room. And then towards the end of the day, there may be a short circle time or some PSED focus or celebrating learning. That is a very, very quick overview. And throughout the week, children will do things like forest school and PE, have a music session pre-COVID. So that gives you a bit of an overview really of the week. Hope that helps, but probably about 3 whole class inputs of around 15 minutes, and then the rest of the time it's working with adults or engaging in provision, chomping challenges that we have set. Provision will be clearly explained to everybody, both inside and outside. Expectations are really clear.
Thank you. And just to pick up on Jan's question about disadvantage, yes, the same, that forensic data analysis will happen as well. Often with our disadvantaged children, it's a focus on, it can change, but generally it's a focus on spoken language and building characteristics of learning that often comes up for our PP children. But we follow the same process that we would in identifying our gender gaps and our barriers and putting things in place.
And I think we have tried lots of things, particularly with our disadvantaged pupils. And whilst we don't make assumptions about the level of home support that they have, and we've had some amazing outcomes from families working really hard with their children at home, we are aware that sometimes we do have disadvantaged children where parents may not have the capacity to do additional home learning. So we've really thought about actually, rather than, although we're trying to encourage and help provide strategies, sometimes it's just that we need to do some extra things at school, and basically that's what we need to do. So we need to ensure they're reading regularly and they're a priority reader and they're reading an adult every day, and we just have to put that additional support in place while that family may not have capacity at that time to focus on certain things.
Thank you everybody. It's been a pleasure to do this today. So I hope everybody's found, I hope you've been able to take something away that you will be able to use. I always often think, even if you go away going, actually we're on the right track and we're I'm really pleased with what we're doing. But yeah, if there's one thing that you can take away and develop, magpie from us and make your own, then please do.
Sorry, before we go, I'm really sorry. I've just noticed Rachel had a question, and I hate to leave unanswered questions. Rachel, strategies for promoting positive parental engagement. Okay, I'm going to share one strategy that's really helped. Is we teachers have found that inviting parents in for mini workshops pre-COVID was really effective, because sometimes parents actually didn't understand what or needed support in actually seeing what we wanted them to do with their children. So modelling some reading, playing little phonic games, inviting them in, that had really huge success. They loved doing that, and they used to do it just before start school for 10 minutes. Teacher would model some games, and then they'd go, right, I know what to do that. Teacher gives the game, they go away and play it. And that was a weekly thing where they'd come in, teacher would model another game, they'd go away and do it, and it built their confidence. They were clear on what they needed to do, and it didn't take up a lot of time. It was just 5-10 minutes. Hope that helps.
Thank you so much, Esin, and thank you, Liz. I think we'll wrap it up there, as I know people do have to get off, but I just wanted to reiterate, a huge thank you and a virtual round of applause for your, like I said, for your time and your efforts this morning. Really, really informative, and like I said, lots of practical tips to help, and you're really embodying, obviously, the spirit of Challenge Partners, which is all about peer support, knowledge exchange, and that open and honest collaboration and challenge as well. So thank you so much for your time. I'm just going to post quickly now the feedback form in the chat. I'll also send this around to all of you individually, as well as a PDF copy of the slides that we used today. But thank you so much for joining us. It was, I hope you found it informative and really helpful, and yeah, big thank you to Esin and Liz for their time. So yeah, thank you everyone.